Hi ladies, I'm Pidge.
And I'm MOWEN.
Welcome to the Night Shift Court podcast. We are two shift-working fantasy book lovers and love nothing more than leaving reality behind for a bookish adventure.
Join us as we go under the mountain to discuss our favourite fantasy fiction tales and the authors behind them.
Come with us to explore the stories, one shift at a time. Hi ladies.
Hello. Welcome back. It's episode 14.
Well done.
Oh, yay, I got it. We're going to be discussing chapters 11 through 15 of A Court of Mist and Fury. If you haven't seen the start of these episodes, then you need to go back to because we are getting into it. I love the development of these types of chapters now because it's a mixture of character building, world building and story building all in one.
Yeah.
We're getting action-packed long chapters, really long. So we're doing our best to kind of pull out the important bits because we could discuss this in depth for days, but we won't do that because you should read it.
Yeah. Then you'll feel it.
You'll feel it. You'll know.
Yeah. So Rhys and Feyre arrive back in the night court after being taken from the spring court and Rhys insinuating that the spring court's low on food. He winnows her away without further comment in style.
Yes.
Typical Rhys. And he asks her to have breakfast with him.
Come sit, eat with me.
She sees and feels the worry in his eyes and voice and she accepts.
Yeah, but she asks him, doesn't he have more important things to do? And he looks her dead in the face and says, I will always make time for you.
Yes, and he bows.
Oh,
Which, again.
sorry, but this is epic. How
I
you
love
don't just
Rhys's
fall in
character.
like how you don't fall in love with him right then and there, Feyre. I don't know what's wrong with you.
Yes. Rhys reveals over breakfast that he insinuates rather that there was an incident at the spring court this month and asks her about it.
And there was. Tamlin lost his temper. Well, I think Tamlin lost his temper. You think Feyre lost hers.
Yeah.
And the room ended up in disarray nonetheless. Yeah. And Rhys felt that through the bond.
Yeah.
So he knew something had gone down. Someone had lost control of their powers and he could feel it.
It was quite significant too because he describes that to Feyre that he doesn't feel anything down the bond anymore and that sometimes he just checks in to make sure that she's still alive. So for him to feel such a big spike of fear or adrenaline is quite a lot.
And I think that that's probably because she's getting better at shielding too. So day to day she's probably working hard at those shields.
Yeah.
Because she doesn't want him in there, let's not forget. At this point, she's not wanting Rhys in her mind.
She still thinks that he's the bad guy. So she's trying to protect the spring court.
That's right.
By protecting her mind so that Rhys doesn't find out stuff about her people, I guess.
Yeah. And she doesn't want to talk about anything that happened with Tamlin. She doesn't want to tell Rhys anything about that.
Yeah.
Obviously, again, she wants to put up a united front. She doesn't want Rhys to know that there is trouble in paradise, so to speak. But they haven't got married. So she first left the spring court at her wedding. They didn't immediately get married on her return.
No.
So something's not quite right.
No.
And Rhys, obviously, he's a smart guy. He knows this.
Feyre's really dismissive of Rhys this particular visit. She's even more sad and depressed than normal. And she doesn't really interact with him at all. He gets her to copy the sentences as per normal and she kind of thrusts the paper at him.
Yes.
He reads it and he's like, okay, very good. And then he instantly launches an attack on her mind, which she deflects.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh, okay, he's a bit impressed. And she just stands up and walks away and said, I had nothing better to do. He gives her space and leaves her a pile of books and says to call if she needs anything.
Yeah.
And she doesn't.
Yeah.
She takes to reading in one of the alcoves, though, on the main level of the building, which is really interesting that she develops a love of reading, even though recently she couldn't read.
That's right.
So obviously really served her. Other than being able to read in general, she's developed something that she quite likes in her very depressed state, which is reading.
Like us, right? Escapism.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And she describes the characters in one of her books. So she says, with those characters who did not exist and never would, but somehow made me feel less alone, which I think we can all relate to.
Definitely.
As fantasy fiction readers.
Yeah, this is why we read, because we love to put reality aside but you don't want to be alone.
Yeah.
And reading just fills you
That's
with characters and life and people. So
Yeah.
it's pretty
And,
magic.
I've said it before and I'll say it again, that reading gives me somewhere to go when I have to stay where I am.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah. We actually see a really genuine part of Reese's personality in this particular chapter as well.
Yes.
So he goes to Feyre and sort of begs her to tell him how to help her.
Yeah.
And he says, like, does no one realize what's going on? Does your High Lord not even care? And again, she's really dismissive of him.
Yeah, I think that her whole relationship at the moment with Reese is trying to push him away because she feels an unnecessary amount of closeness between them. They've got this bond through the bargain, admittedly, probably not through the bargain, but they've got this bond. She doesn't want it, but she's making use out of it. But he's getting too close, and although she doesn't really have the energy to push him away, the only thing she really has the energy to do is just not engage. I think it's her trying to keep him at arm's length.
Reese does actually get her to use her powers, though, in this instance. So he snaps the book shut and she freezes the book and in typical Feyre fashion throws it at him.
Love it. Feisty little bitch.
Yeah, I love it. She then turns her hands into flames and Reese just looks really relieved that she's able to feel something other than the hollow silence of the void of her mind that he's been looking at or feeling for the last month.
Yeah. She goes to the spring court and becomes just this shell.
Yeah, that's right.
And she comes back to the night court and she, even though she's hostile, she has something
that's right
in her.
Yeah. And so that's basically all that happens in this particular trip to the night court this month. She's taken back to the spring court and the guards are back again the next morning in full force.
Yeah. Tamlin's becoming ridiculously overprotective. The more she gets taken away, the more ridiculous the behaviour gets on her return. He could pee on her. That's how, do you know what I mean? Like he needs to mark his territory. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Into chapter 12 now, Feyre notices claws appearing on her hand and realises it's Tamlin's power. And Lucien notices and tries to talk to Feyre about it.
Yeah.
Lucien tells her that these powers will manifest whether she trains them or not. So he's obviously encouraging her to talk to Tamlin about it and to take hold of what he knows is inside of her.
Yeah. So Lucien knows now. Tamlin suspects but doesn't want her to train. But Lucien actually says to her that he'll try and talk to Tamlin again.
Yes.
And Feyre essentially knows the answer and she just looks at him and then leaves the room without another word because she already knows what the answer will be. Tamlin's gone for 8 days now as well, and him and Ianthe go straight into a meeting upon his return. Classic Tamlin move, doesn't greet Feyre. She doesn't eat dinner and for the first time she locks her bedroom door.
Yeah, it's a big call, isn't it? So Feyre overhears the boys and Ianthe having a chat.
In the office.
In the office.
In the study, sorry.
The famous study.
Yeah. It's put back together again.
Obviously been reparoed by Dumbledore.
Yeah.
She notes that some High Lords will want to kill her because Feyre's got part of their powers.
Yeah.
And other High Lords will want her to bear their children because their children will have those powers.
Yes.
And they're all discussing killing off Reese to get out of this bargain.
Well, I think it's because Tamlin suspects that he knows.
Yes.
And he's not sure what Reese will do with that information.
Yeah. But naturally, Reese is not even going to play into that.
No.
Lucien begs Tamlin to let her train so that she'll stand a chance against these High Lords no matter what they're coming to do to her, whether they want to steal her for children or whether they want to end her in an attempt to get their power back. I don't know how that works. I don't think that's a thing. But he says no because training her would make the other High Lords aware of her powers and he doesn't want to draw attention to that fact. He has another outburst at this point.
It's very emotional.
Yeah, and so obviously Feyre's locked herself in her room. She's not eating. And then the next day, Tamlin and Lucien are heading out and Feyre asks to go with them. And Tamlin says no. And again, she's pretty much begging him at this point to let her go.
Yeah, it's a really desperate scene, isn't it?
Really, I remember feeling viscerally affected by this.
Yeah.
Because I think all women have felt something like this at one point in their life. Not by being physically restrained, or just the fact that someone's telling them, maybe it's a childhood thing, someone's telling them not to do something that they want to do. We've all been there, whether it's our parents that have forbidden us to go and do something. I know you were a fucking rebel, so you probably what? Surely you never did anything your parents told you.
I was perfectly well behaved. Thank you.
Sure.
Don't any of my school friends comment. Shush. Enough.
Anyway, getting back to the story. So she reminds him that she's promised to be better. She tells him that she needs to get out of the manor.
Yeah.
And Tamlin says, I can't risk this. He's basically said, let me train so that you will feel better about me being out and about. And he's having none of this.
That's right.
Yeah. Which is wildly controlling and inappropriate, and I don't appreciate it. So Tamlin, fuck you.
So he actually creates like a shield like Feyre did, or that he did potentially in the office.
Yep.
And locks her in the manor.
Yeah. This is where it gets bad.
Yeah. Yeah. He wards it around her so other people can come in and out as they please, and it only affects her, that she's unable to leave until he lifts this magical shield. Anyway, she has what I would describe as a magical panic attack.
How does that go?
Like a
I wish you all could have seen that. You have to, if you're listening on Spotify or Apple, you have to come over to YouTube and just watch what PIDGE just did.
So anyway, all of her powers combined.
I am Captain Planet. Captain Planet, he's our hero. Gonna take pollution down to zero. So, Feyre wraps herself in a cocoon of darkness, fire and ice.
Exactly what I said.
Yes. It melts her engagement ring right off her finger. She feels someone pick her up, thinking it's Amarantha for a moment, but then she realises it's Moore who's picked her up.
So when she is picked up by Moore, she says an unmistakably female body. I'm like, cool, you felt her boobs. Like,
boobies.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, what else?
Yeah.
So I was like, okay.
Yeah, because they're all fae, right? They're all soft and they smell good and whatever.
Yeah.
The only thing is that they don't have a penis.
Yeah.
And they have some boobies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
it's like, okay, you and Moore have had a moment. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, moving on.
So Moore, obviously she makes her way back to the Night Court, and Moore tells Rhys that she was able to shatter the shield.
So Rhys shatters the shield and Moore goes in and knocks out the guards.
Okay. Roger.
Do you remember the bit where she says, "Did you really think his shield would keep you from us?" Rhys shattered it with half a thought.
Oh,
yeah.
But he wasn't there.
No, so legally, as a High Lord, he wasn't allowed to go and take Feyre from another court. So Moore went in, who's a representative of the court.
Roger.
Knocked out the guards, picked up Feyre, winnowed her to what I think was the summer court.
Yes.
So
somewhere
to a different
neutral.
court. Yep. And then he arrived at that court, took Feyre and winnowed her back to the night court.
Roger.
Yep.
Okay. No worries. They tell Feyre she's free now.
The next day, Feyre wakes up in the night court with Rhys sitting in the room on a lounge chair.
Just chilling.
Yeah. She describes that he looks like he's been there the whole night as well.
Yeah, he says basically he could hear her screaming and he was watching over her. Yeah. And she's obviously paranoid that Tamlin is going to send people to come and collect her, and he explains the fact that he couldn't be the one to come and get her because otherwise Tamlin would then have free range to march on him and collect her back. So he sent Moore to do the actual collecting, winnowed to like a neutral territory where he was waiting for her.
Yep.
So everything that was done by the book, so to speak, is so that they're not giving Tamlin free reign to come into the night court to fetch her.
That's right. They have a little conversation and Rhys produces a mug of tea for her, which I mean, again, who doesn't love themselves a cup of tea in bed?
Honestly, this man.
Rhys says to her, stay here however long you like, stay here forever if you feel like it. But he can see that Feyre is reluctant to beg. So she says, I don't have anywhere else to go. So it's both a question and a plea.
Yes.
But he can see that she doesn't want to beg like she used to have to.
Yeah.
So he offers for her to work with him like he did. So he had actually offered her that at her first trip to the night court to work with him, and she declined because she knew it would just piss Tamlin off. So he says, to work with him and he will provide food, shelter and clothing.
Yeah, which I think she quite likes because giving her an excuse to have purpose, but also if she does encounter Tamlin again, she's got something to cling on to, not that she begged to stay with him or he was holding her captive. It's like, oh, well, he offered, this gave me purpose sort of thing.
Well, Reese knows that she loves a bit of purpose.
Yeah.
So he's not just saying, okay, just stay here and I'll give you everything.
Yeah,
he's saying, work for me.
Yes, he's appealing to her needs.
That's right, yeah.
That Tamlin can't give her.
Yeah. And Feyre has a really pivotal moment where she decides that she isn't going back to the spring court, not until she figures some things out. But it's a big call for her, someone who's engaged still, I guess.
Well,
to
the ring is melted, so.
Well, I guess he knows that probably now, but he didn't know it when he left.
Yeah.
And I assume Tamlin wouldn't have known that she was gone until he got back, right? So.
Yeah, as implied as it is, it's not implied because Tamlin's a douche.
Tamlin probably wouldn't even notice.
It's like, what? She's gone?
Reese tells Feyre that she should rest for a few days as well. But she decides that she doesn't want to do that. She knows that all she'll have in the next few days are her lonely ass thoughts for company.
Yep.
So she asks Reese to go with him and she says the word please, but she knows she hates that word because she knows that she said it to Tamlin multiple times and it did nothing to sway his mind. So she's actually really surprised when Reese agrees.
Yeah, he's like, yeah.
And he gives her a polite reminder that she looks like hell. And he's like, if you want to wash up, we leave in 10 minutes. But in actual fact, he's just standing there the whole time waiting for her to have a bath.
Yeah. It's pretty cute, actually.
Yeah. She asks where they're going and he says a very famous line in the series, which is to Valaris, the city of starlight. So this is the first time we hear of Valaris.
Oh, anyway, we'll get into how amazing it is. Yeah. But he winnows with her and she finds herself in the foyer of a townhouse in the middle of a city.
Yeah.
And she's in Valaris.
Yeah, that's right.
And so begins part 2, the House of Wind.
The townhouse is described as having red carpets, a black marble fireplace, which would look amazing. That's certainly my vibe.
Yeah.
Worn leather furniture, and the sitting room actually has a bookcase on each wall.
Stop it.
Yeah. And then on the other side in the dining room is a table big enough for 10 people. However, it's not like the Manor's dining room, which has a really grand table. It's just like a big oak, I think it was oak or cherry wood like table, like really simple table. It's just that it's really big.
Yeah. It's homely.
That's right, yeah.
So it reminds me of when you'd walk into like an old British pub.
Yeah.
And a big communal table would be like around the fire or something. That's that's the feels that you get from this place.
Yeah. Reese reveals that it is his family home in the city and that his other home is the House of Wind, which is for more formal occasions.
Yeah.
And that other than his two trusty, I want to say slaves, but they're not, two trusty servants, it'll just be the two of them.
Yeah. So he says that only him and Moore can winnow directly into the house and it's otherwise warded and shielded so that only he and Feyre can enter. So she knows that she's safe because obviously she's paranoid, and he tells her that the walls of Valaris have not been breached in 5,000 years, which is obviously a huge deal considering he's been under the mountain for 50. She knows that this place is secret.
That's right, yeah. And she knows that, I mean, she's been to one village, but from her understanding, there was nothing that escaped Amarantha's wrath.
That's right.
At all. So she does register that thought, but doesn't go anywhere with it as she's quite tired. So she decides to go and have a nap. But before the nap, there's two figures that appear in the doorway. There's like frosted glass so she can't see.
Yeah.
The two very large male figures with wing tips pointing above their shoulders. And there's a little bit of banter through the door between Reese and these two male figures. And Feyre describes Rhys as appearing a little more mortal or a little more human after this particular interaction.
Yeah.
'Cause she described Rhys's eye roll at the breakfast table one morning as like the most human gesture that he'd ever made.
Yeah.
And so this is the second time that she sees a more human version or the real Rhys.
So we're introduced slyly to Az and Cassian.
Yeah, that's right.
And Moore and another female. They're having a bit of banter at the door. So she goes upstairs rather than
For an
involving herself
Yeah.
to meet them.
Yeah.
And she asks Nuala and Ceridwen who the guests are, and she explains, or they explain, that they're Rhys's inner circle.
I made a little note here that Feyre has chosen a nap over socialising, which I can really, really relate to.
Amen, sister. Amen.
I was like, yeah, I would have done exactly the same thing.
Yeah. Weighing up our options, a nap will always be chosen.
Yeah. And Feyre goes to bed or to her nap, and the last thing that she thinks about is that maybe Amarantha won after all, because she can't stand the Spring Court and she can't face Tamlin after what he's done.
Yes.
So Amarantha actually got what she wanted.
Yeah.
Which is really sad.
Yeah, it is sad. If it's she wonders if that's her punishment.
That's right.
And it's fitting for her.
She wakes up from her nap 4 hours later
Yeah.
and decides to think about the Spring Court on another day.
Yeah.
Which is quite a parallel, because in book 1, when there's a moment where she decides to think about what happened under the mountain another day,
Yeah.
and that's her decision.
Yes.
She makes the same decision this time around, which is such a PTSD thing to do.
Yeah, I'll
to
deal with
just
that
Put it
one day.
Yeah, put it away
Yeah.
and deal with it later, but then never actually getting around to dealing with it.
True story.
Yeah, she's very typical in her behaviour, or her repetitive behaviours around her trauma.
So her and Rhys go for a walk.
They do.
Yeah. And she describes the city as beautiful and not the dark place that she imagined it to be. And Rhys points out a mountain range and the middle peak.
Yeah.
And Feyre notices it has windows, and he tells her that's my second home. It's known as the House of Wind, and that's where they're going to be having dinner tonight.
Yeah.
Can you imagine that? Take me now.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm there. I'm ready for the House of Wind. Rhys describes Valaris's survival as luck. So the city itself, he reveals, isn't actually known outside of the Night Court. So no other territory or court know of it.
Yeah.
I don't think a lot of other courts know of many places, but apparently this was one that nobody outside of knew of. So it's probably quite a big secret within the Night Court anyway.
Yeah.
And Feyre starts to get a little bit pissed off that he's protected an area but decided not to open it up as refuge for everybody else. And Rhys says, when Amarantha came, I had to make some very hard choices very quickly.
Yeah.
And that line in particular just reminds me a little bit of our work, that sometimes at the end of the day I think to myself, I had to make some really hard decisions today in a really short time frame that affect people's lives.
Yeah.
So I can really relate to that.
Yeah, decision fatigue and big decisions. It weighs heavy on you. And so I can absolutely relate to how he would have felt to do the least harm and subsequently kept Valaris safe by keeping everyone in it safe but not allowing those at risk into it. Would have been really stressful. Really stressful.
And he takes her shopping as well.
He does.
Like not to buy anything. It's just a bit of a tour, but he does describe the shopping district as having 4 palaces that have different wares. So there's the Palace of Thread and Jewels, the Palace of Bone and Salt, the Palace of Hoof and Leaf, and then the Rainbow of Valaris, which is the art district, which we hear a little bit more later on.
What's interesting about this is already I feel like I know more about the Night Court than the Spring Court, because not once have we heard about anything other than the woods in the Spring Court, right?
Yeah.
We haven't really heard about anything else in the Spring Court. A shop, a pub, nothing.
Other than that one destroyed village.
Yeah, but it's
That was
it's
nothing.
wrecked.
Yeah.
And I get it. Like it's wrecked, but we haven't met anyone, and already we've been introduced to like several characters and have deep dove into a city and the things that make it what it is.
Feyre is quite affected by the artist's quarter,
Mm-hmm.
and she can't really verbalise that still. So she just says, "I'm tired," and Reese is like, "Okay, well, it's time for dinner anyway."
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
He just like brushes over it, doesn't make a big deal out of it, and off they go.
And
back.
she's like, "But who's going to be there?"
Yeah.
And so Reese says, "Well, Moore will be there. You've met Moore." And then he says Cassian and Azrael and Amran.
Yeah.
And he says that Amran is his second in command
Yeah.
and Moore is his third.
She's very surprised by that.
Yeah, two ladies.
Yeah.
He tells her Amran looks high fae, but is something else. And she's older than the city itself. She's vain and she hoards jewellery.
I'm so interested in Amran as a character because we hear and see these tiny little bits of information about her, but we actually have no idea where she came from, what she is, or what's going to happen with her.
Yeah.
So in a particular dining room scene that's coming up, there's just like a look that is shared between two characters about something that would interest Amran, and Feyre picks up on it but doesn't realise why.
Yeah.
And I know why because I've read the series, but doing the reread, I picked up on so many things where I was like, oh. And I still really am confused about what she is and where she comes from.
There's more to come.
There is.
There's
I'm
so
sure
much
there
more
is.
to come here. She reminds me of a cat.
Yeah, okay.
You know how cats are just aloof and you don't really know what they're going to do next.
Yeah.
Dogs are reliable.
Yeah.
They just want love.
Yeah.
Cats, not so much.
Cassian's the dog.
Yeah. Cassian is the border collie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Agree.
And Amran is, the rag doll that could turn on you at any minute.
Yes.
Feyre does get warned that Amran has a temper and that even though he's the most powerful High Lord in Prithian's history, that he doesn't mess with her.
Yeah.
So,
I love Feyre's quote around, so if we get into a brawl and I rip off her necklace, she'll roast and eat me. And I'm like... I just love Feyre's attitude when she's sassy, like shoe throwing.
Yeah.
And like saying she's going to rip off someone's necklace. Like, yeah, I love it.
this is the true Feyre.
Yeah, I want the fight.
Yeah.
So Reese explains that those with mind powers.
Dimarti.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so she has absorbed this power from Reese.
Yeah.
So we know that Feyre has this gift. So when Reese touches Feyre, she suddenly enters his mind and sees through his eyes, and she realises how gaunt and starved she looks. And Reese doesn't know how Feyre got through his shield, but he tells her that those that can slip into other people's minds are called Dimarti, and that she must have this gift because it's been bestowed upon her by Reese.
That's right. Yeah. And Reese's powers mistook her for Reese, and that's how she was able to get through, which he finds very interesting.
Very interesting.
Yeah. So dinner time comes and they're standing up on the terrace above Reese's townhouse, having a little argument because apparently you can't winnow into the House of Wind.
You can't.
It's warded against anyone winnowing in, especially High Lords.
Yep.
So the only options are either to fly or to walk up 10,000 steps.
Yeah.
And Feyre's really annoyed because she doesn't want to fly up. So she's like, well, I'll just walk up the 10,000 steps. But I cannot relate.
No, get me on that body.
That's not what I was expecting.
Actually, it wasn't what I was even planning to say, but when I was thinking about Reese, I was like, yeah.
Why not?
Yeah.
Speaking of, Feyre starts to put up some really piss poor excuses as to why she can't fly with him. So she's like, oh, like the wind will ruin my hair. She's like, and the wind will rip this gown right off. And all he does in return is offer her a feline smile. I'm just like, yep. Love that.
Oh, he's so naughty and I love
Isn't
it.
he? Yeah, I love his personality.
Yeah.
So he uses his wing to like block her exit of the terrace and like herd her closer to him where she describes how he smells, which is rain, salt and something citrusy. And to be honest, I don't mind rain and something citrusy, but I'm a little bit concerned that salt is probably sweat.
Yeah. So I don't know whether or not to tell you this because you're probably use it against me. But don't you find sweat, like the smell of sweat, a bit...
Do I find the smell of sweat what?
Just a little bit hot?
Oh, no.
You know when like, I can't redeem myself now, can I?
Keep digging.
You know
Keep
when
going.
your man's been working hard outside and he comes in and...
Well, your man works out in the house. So
Yeah, and I appreciate it.
do you sit there and smell him?
Not on purpose, but if he comes over to me and he's sweaty and not dripping, but like, you know, a little bit. Anyway, this is not about my preferences, which I seem to talk about a lot.
That's fine. So let's agree to disagree about the smell of salt.
Right, citrus and something else. I don't know.
Yeah, okay. So herds her closer with his wing, puts his arm around her and under her knees, and then she's like, okay, well, just promise not to drop me and promise not to. And then again, cheeky Reese just shoots into the sky and doesn't let her finish her sentence.
Yeah, I love it.
Reese reveals a little bit of information about himself as a child on the fly up to the House of Wind, about how he used to jump out the window and fly all night, and his mum would join him.
Yeah.
His dad never knew. Reese uses the word, when Feyre says, she must have been lovely, he said she was, which gives Feyre the understanding that she knows that she's dead and she doesn't ask any other questions about it.
Yep. And I didn't think about these things at the time, but obviously we then know his mum had wings, so she was Illyrian.
Yeah, yes.
And his father was not.
Yeah, they arrive on a balcony and Feyre looks over Valaris and just again notes how beautiful and classically stunning it is of a nighttime, as is the night court.
Yeah.
And Reese asks her to reveal a truth for a truth, and they do. So he reveals about, you know, how he never thought he'd see Valaris again after 50 years under the mountain. And Feyre reveals that she must have been stupid for letting Tamlin show her so little of the Spring Court.
Yeah.
And that there's a whole world out there.
Exactly.
That's it for this episode of the Night Shift Court podcast. Join us for next week's episode, where we will continue the adventure from ACOTAR's Book 2, A Court of Mist and Fury.
Whichever platform you're listening on, we would so appreciate if you could give us a 5-star review. You can follow us on Instagram and TikTok at The Night Shift Court.
I hope the night is kind.